Have you ever noticed how your mind can keep moving even when your body is exhausted? You lie down. The room is quiet. Nothing around you is happening. But inside your head, everything is still running. Thought after thought. Question after question. What if something goes wrong? What if you made a mistake? What if something bad is coming and you just can't see it yet? Sometimes worry doesn't even have a clear reason. Your mind simply refuses to stop. And maybe tonight you recognize that feeling. Maybe your mind has been working much harder than your heart. Maybe you have tried to calm it down. You tried distraction. You tried pushing the thoughts away. You tried telling yourself that everything is probably fine. But the thoughts keep returning. Not loudly, but constantly. Like waves that never quite stop reaching the shore. And when that happens, many people start believing something is wrong with them. But the truth is simpler than that. Your mind is not broken. Your mind is trying to protect you. Worry is often the brain's way of scanning the horizon for danger. It wants certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants control. But life rarely gives any of those things. And when certainty is missing, the mind starts filling the silence with possibilities. Most of them negative. Not because they are true, but because the brain believes preparing for the worst might keep you safe. Yet what begins as protection can quietly become exhaustion. Because a mind that never rests slowly convinces the heart that peace is impossible. But that is not true. Peace is not the absence of thoughts. Peace is learning which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones can gently pass by. And tonight, if your mind has been racing, you don't need to fight it. You don't need to silence every thought. You only need to breathe and remember something simple. You are not alone in this struggle. And more importantly, your thoughts are not your direction. They are only passing weather inside your mind. Storms pass, clouds move, and even the most restless sky eventually becomes quiet again. So for the next few minutes, you don't have to solve anything. You don't have to control tomorrow. You only need to sit here and let your mind rest for a moment. Because sometimes the first step toward peace is not fixing your thoughts. It is realizing you don't have to follow all of them. Have you ever noticed something strange about the mind? The more you try to force it to be quiet, the louder it sometimes becomes. You tell yourself, stop thinking about this. And suddenly, that is the only thing your mind wants to think about. It can feel frustrating, exhausting, sometimes even a little frightening. Because when your thoughts keep racing, it can feel like you are losing control of your own mind. But here is something important that many people never realize. Your mind was never designed to become calm through force. Trying to push thoughts away often gives them more power. It's like standing on the shore trying to stop the waves from reaching the beach. You push one wave away, and another one comes, and another, and another. Eventually you become tired, not because the ocean is stronger than you, but because the ocean was never meant to be controlled. Your thoughts work in a similar way. They appear, they rise, they move, and if we allow them, they pass. But when we worry, we tend to grab those thoughts and hold on to them. We analyze them, we question them. We replay them again and again as if repeating the thought might somehow bring certainty. But often it doesn't. It simply brings more tension. Many people believe that if they think about something long enough, they will eventually find peace. But the truth is that some thoughts do not need answers. Some thoughts only need distance. Because not every thought is a message, not every thought is a warning, and not every thought is something you need to follow. Sometimes a thought is simply a reaction, a passing moment inside a busy mind. And tonight, if your mind feels restless, you don't need to silence every thought. You only need to stop chasing them. Imagine sitting beside a quiet lake. Leaves fall into the water and slowly drift away. You don't jump into the lake to chase each leaf. You simply watch them move across the surface. Your thoughts can be like that. They can appear without controlling you. They can move without defining you. and they can pass without becoming your direction. Your mind does not need to be perfect tonight. It does not need to be silent. It only needs permission to slow down. Sometimes that permission begins with something very simple: breathing slowly, allowing your shoulders to relax, letting the moment exist without trying to solve everything. Because peace rarely arrives when we force our minds to stop thinking. Peace arrives when we stop believing that every thought deserves our attention. Have you ever wondered why worry can feel so powerful? Sometimes it arrives suddenly. You are having a normal day. Nothing dramatic is happening. And then a single thought appears. Just one. And somehow that one thought starts pulling many others behind it. A small question becomes a bigger one. A simple concern becomes a heavy feeling. And before you realize it, your mind is traveling through possibilities that may never even happen. This is how worry often grows. Not because something terrible is happening, but because the mind is trying to prepare for every possible future. The mind wants certainty. It wants to know that tomorrow will be safe. It wants guarantees that everything will work out. But life rarely gives those guarantees. And when certainty is missing, the mind begins to imagine. Sometimes it imagines helpful things, but often it imagines problems. Not because those problems are real, but because the mind believes that preparing for danger might protect you. It's a survival instinct. Your brain is trying to keep you safe. But sometimes that instinct works a little too hard. Instead of protecting you, it keeps you trapped inside endless scenarios. What if this goes wrong? What if I fail? What if I made a mistake? What if something bad happens? And the mind keeps spinning. Not because those things are happening, but because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Yet here is something important to remember. Worry often feels powerful not because it is true, but because it repeats itself. The more a thought repeats, the more real it feels. But repetition does not equal truth. A thought can appear 100 times in your mind and still not be reality. Sometimes worry is simply a loud voice inside a quiet room. And when that voice keeps speaking, it can begin to sound convincing. But thoughts are not always instructions. They are not always predictions. And they are not always messages you need to obey. Sometimes they are simply noise. And the moment you realize that, something begins to change. Because if a thought is only a thought, you do not have to follow it. You can notice it, you can acknowledge it, and then you can let it pass. This does not mean your mind will immediately become quiet, but it means the thought no longer controls your direction. And that is where freedom begins. Not in forcing your mind to stop thinking, but in realizing that worry does not get to lead your life. Your direction is not decided by your most anxious thoughts. Your direction comes from something deeper, from your values, from your faith, from the quiet trust that God is still guiding your steps even when your mind feels uncertain. And when you remember that, worry begins to lose its authority. It becomes smaller, less convincing, less powerful, because the truth is simple. Your thoughts may speak loudly, but they do not get to decide your path. When your mind won't stop worrying, most people believe they need answers. They believe that if they could just solve the problem, the mind would finally become quiet. But often the mind is not asking for answers, it is asking for relief. Sometimes your mind is not searching for solutions, it is searching for rest, and that is something many people forget. Because we live in a world that teaches us to fix everything quickly. But the human mind does not always calm down through solutions. Sometimes it calms down through safety. When your nervous system feels safe, your thoughts begin to slow down. Not instantly, but gradually. Like waves that begin to settle after a storm passes. Your mind does not need perfection tonight. It only needs permission to slow down. And that permission can begin with something very simple. Breathing slowly. Allowing your body to soften. letting the moment exist without trying to solve everything at once. Because peace is rarely something we force. Peace is something we allow. And when you give your mind a moment of gentleness, it begins to remember that rest is still possible. One of the most exhausting habits the human mind can develop is this: believing every thought that appears. Most people grow up assuming that if a thought enters their mind, it must mean something. If a worry appears, they believe it must be important. If a fear shows up, they believe it must be a warning. If doubt appears, they believe it must be telling the truth. But the mind produces thousands of thoughts every single day. Some are helpful, some are creative, some are curious, and some are simply reactions. Yet when worry takes over, the mind begins to treat every thought as if it were urgent. Every possibility feels like a problem that must be solved immediately. And that is where exhaustion begins, because the mind is capable of creating endless scenarios. What if something goes wrong tomorrow? What if I disappoint someone? What if I'm not strong enough? What if I miss something important? And suddenly your mind is not living in the present moment anymore. It is running through imaginary futures, trying to solve situations that may never exist. This is one of the quiet traps of worry. It convinces you that thinking more will eventually create control. But often thinking more only creates more noise. Your mind is not broken when it worries. It is simply trying to protect you. The problem is that protection without limits can become pressure. The mind scans the horizon for danger, and when it finds none, it sometimes creates possibilities just to stay alert. But here is a truth that many people need to hear. You do not have to believe every thought that enters your mind. Thoughts are not commands. They are not orders. They are not instructions that must be followed. They are simply mental activity, just like clouds moving across the sky. Some clouds are dark. Some are light. Some move quickly. Some stay longer. But none of them control the sky itself. Your mind is the sky. Your thoughts are the clouds. And clouds always pass. When people begin to understand this, something changes inside them. They stop fighting every thought. They stop trying to silence the mind through force. Instead, they begin to watch their thoughts. They notice them. They acknowledge them. And they allow them to move. Because peace does not come from controlling every thought. Peace comes from realizing that thoughts do not define your direction. Your direction comes from something deeper. Your values, your faith, your character, your trust that even when the mind feels uncertain, God is still guiding your steps. Sometimes the mind will produce anxious thoughts. That is part of being human. But those thoughts do not get to decide the path of your life. You can notice them without following them. You can acknowledge them without obeying them. And slowly, the more distance you create between yourself and every anxious thought, the quieter your mind begins to feel. Not instantly, but gradually. Like a storm that begins to lose its strength. And in that quiet space, something gentle begins to grow. Trust. Trust that not every fear is a prophecy. Trust that not every doubt is truth. Trust that your mind can learn to rest. And when the mind begins to rest, the heart begins to breathe again. Because worry loses its power the moment you realize one simple truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the one observing them. There are moments in life when worry feels stronger than faith. Many people feel ashamed to admit that. They believe that if their faith were strong enough, they would never feel anxious. They believe that real faith means a mind that never trembles. But that is not how the human heart works. Faith does not erase every moment of fear. Faith does not remove every anxious thought. Faith does not mean that the mind will never struggle. Even people who trust God deeply sometimes find themselves lying awake at night with questions running through their minds. Even people who pray sometimes feel uncertainty. Even people who believe sometimes feel overwhelmed. And that does not mean their faith is weak. It means they are human. Faith was never meant to replace your humanity. Faith was meant to walk with you through your humanity. Many of the people we read about in Scripture experienced moments like this. Moments when the future looked unclear. Moments when the path ahead felt uncertain. Moments when they had to continue walking without knowing exactly what would happen next. Faith did not remove those moments, but faith gave them something else: direction. Because faith is not the absence of questions. Faith is the decision to continue walking even when the answers are incomplete. Worry often tries to convince you that uncertainty means danger. It whispers that if you cannot see the whole path, something must be wrong. But life has never worked that way. Very few people ever see the entire road ahead. Most of us are simply given the next step, and sometimes that is enough. The mind wants guarantees, the heart wants certainty. But God often works differently. Instead of revealing the entire journey, He gives guidance one step at a time. Not because He wants to confuse you, but because trust grows in small steps. If we could see everything in advance, trust would not be necessary. But when the road is partially hidden, faith becomes a quiet companion, not a loud certainty, not a perfect understanding, but a steady reminder that you are not walking alone. And when worry becomes loud, it can try to drown out that reminder. It can make the future feel darker than it actually is. But worry is not a prophet. It does not know the future. It only reacts to uncertainty. Faith, however, is different. Faith does not need complete visibility. Faith moves forward even when the road is still unfolding. Sometimes the most powerful form of faith is not confidence. It is persistence. It is the quiet decision to keep moving forward even when your mind feels uncertain. And if tonight your mind feels restless, that does not mean your faith is gone. It simply means your mind is tired. Faith can still exist inside a tired mind. Faith can still exist inside a worried heart. Because faith is not the absence of struggle. Faith is the quiet strength that keeps guiding you forward, even when the mind is full of questions. And slowly, as you continue walking, you may begin to notice something. The road becomes clearer, not all at once, but little by little. And the worries that once felt enormous begin to lose their weight. Not because life became perfect, but because you remembered who was walking with you. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep alone cannot fix. You can rest your body. You can close your eyes. You can spend hours in bed and still wake up feeling heavy inside. Because sometimes the exhaustion is not in the body, it is in the mind. A tired mind often carries too many things for too long. Too many questions, too many possibilities, too many responsibilities, too many things that feel uncertain. When the mind keeps trying to control every possibility, it slowly becomes overwhelmed. It keeps searching for answers. It keeps trying to prepare for situations that may never happen. It keeps replaying conversations. It keeps imagining outcomes. And little by little, the mind becomes crowded. Not with reality, but with possibilities. And that kind of thinking can quietly drain your energy. Because every thought requires attention. Every scenario requires emotional space. And when the mind keeps producing new scenarios again and again, it becomes difficult to rest. The mind begins to believe that if it stops thinking, something important might be missed. But that belief can slowly create exhaustion. Because no human mind was designed to carry everything. You were never meant to hold every possible future inside your head. You were never meant to solve every uncertainty before it even arrives. Life was not designed to be controlled that way. And when we try to control too much, the mind becomes tired. Not weak, not broken, just tired. A tired mind does not mean something is wrong with you. It means you have been carrying too much weight for too long. And sometimes the first step toward peace is not solving everything. It is setting something down, letting the mind breathe. allowing yourself to admit that you do not have to hold every possibility tonight. The future does not need to be solved right now. Tomorrow will bring its own moments, its own challenges, its own grace, and tonight, your mind deserves a moment of rest. Because even the strongest mind needs quiet. Even the most responsible heart needs space to breathe. And when you give yourself permission to release what cannot be controlled, something inside you begins to soften. Your breathing slows, your shoulders relax, and the thoughts that once felt urgent begin to lose their intensity. Not all at once, but gradually. Like a room that slowly becomes quieter after a long conversation ends. Your mind does not need to carry everything tonight. Some things can wait. Some answers will come later. And some worries will disappear once the mind is allowed to rest again. Something interesting begins to happen when you stop feeding worry. At first, it feels strange. Your mind is used to returning to the same thoughts again and again. It has practiced that habit for a long time. Whenever uncertainty appears, the mind tries to fill the space. It searches for answers. It imagines outcomes. It tries to prepare for every possibility. And for a while, it may feel almost automatic, like a wheel that keeps turning even after you try to slow it down. But slowly, something begins to change. When you stop chasing every worry, your mind begins to notice something new. Silence. Not perfect silence, but small spaces between thoughts. Moments where the mind is not searching for problems. Moments where the mind is simply resting. These spaces may feel small at first, a few seconds, maybe a minute. But they matter more than you realize. Because peace rarely arrives all at once. It often arrives in small openings, small pauses, small breaths of quiet inside a busy mind. Worry grows stronger when we keep giving it attention. Every time we replay the same concern, we give it energy. Every time we follow the same fearful path in our thoughts, we strengthen the habit. But when we gently step away from that pattern, the mind slowly begins to learn a new rhythm. A calmer rhythm. Not a perfect mind. Not a silent mind. But a mind that is no longer trapped inside the same loop. Many people believe that peace means the complete absence of anxious thoughts. But that expectation often creates frustration, because the mind is always thinking. That is what it was designed to do. Peace is not the absence of thought. Peace is the absence of constant struggle with those thoughts. It is the moment when you realize you do not need to wrestle with every idea that appears. You can notice it. You can acknowledge it. And then you can return to the present moment, to your breathing, to the quiet around you, to the reminder that right now, in this moment, you are here, and you are breathing. When the mind learns that it does not have to chase every worry, something gentle begins to grow. Space. Space between thoughts. Space between reactions. Space where calm can exist. And in that space, your heart begins to feel lighter. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because your mind is no longer carrying every possible future. The future will come one day at a time, and when it arrives, you will meet it with the strength you have in that moment. You do not need tomorrow's strength today. You only need this moment, this breath, this quiet reminder that your mind can learn a different way of living. A way where thoughts exist, but they do not control the direction of your life. And when worry loses its constant fuel, its voice slowly becomes softer. Not gone, but quieter. And sometimes, quiet is the beginning of peace. One of the most important things you can learn about your mind is this simple truth. Your thoughts are not your direction. Many people spend years believing that whatever they think must be followed. If a fearful thought appears, they assume it means danger. If doubt appears, they assume it means they should stop. If uncertainty appears, they assume something is wrong. But thoughts are not leaders. They are signals. Sometimes they reflect real concerns. Sometimes they reflect imagination. Sometimes they reflect old fears that have not fully faded yet. And sometimes they simply reflect a tired mind. But none of these things have the authority to define the path of your life. Your thoughts may speak loudly, but volume does not equal truth. A loud thought can still be wrong. A quiet voice can still be right. Many of the most meaningful decisions in life are not made from the loudest thoughts. They are made from the deepest convictions. From the quiet place inside the heart where faith and values live. That place is calmer than the mind. It is slower. It is steadier. And it does not panic when uncertainty appears. When worry becomes loud, it often tries to rush you. It tells you that something must be solved right now. It tells you that if you do not control everything, something terrible will happen. But the voice of wisdom rarely rushes. The voice of wisdom moves slowly, carefully, patiently. And often it speaks with a quiet confidence. That quiet confidence does not come from knowing everything. It comes from trust. Trust that life unfolds one step at a time. Trust that even when your mind feels uncertain, God is still present. Trust that you do not have to understand every part of the journey to continue walking forward. This is where many people find freedom. Not by eliminating every anxious thought, but by realizing that anxious thoughts do not get to choose their direction. Your life is not guided by your most worried moments. Your life is guided by your deepest commitments. Your compassion, your courage, your desire to live with purpose, and your faith that something greater than fear is still guiding your steps. When you remember that, something shifts inside you. Worry may still appear, but it no longer feels like the voice in charge. It becomes just another sound passing through the mind, and the path ahead begins to feel clearer. Not because every doubt disappeared, but because you remembered that your direction was never meant to be decided by worry. Your direction comes from something stronger, something quieter, something deeper, and that place is still within you. Before this moment ends, there is something gentle I want you to remember. Your mind may not be quiet yet. Some thoughts may still be moving. Some questions may still feel unanswered, and that is okay. Peace does not always arrive in perfect silence. Sometimes peace begins with a small shift, a moment where you realize that you do not have to carry every thought that appears. You do not have to solve every possibility tonight. You do not have to control everything that might happen tomorrow. Right now, you are here. You are breathing. And this moment is enough. Worry often tries to convince us that everything must be figured out immediately. It tells us that if we do not think harder, something will fall apart. But life rarely asks us to solve the entire future at once. Most days only ask us for one step, one decision, one moment of courage, one moment of trust. And when you focus on the step in front of you, the path slowly becomes clearer. Not all at once, but gradually. Many people believe that peace will come only when life becomes certain. But certainty is rare, and yet peace is still possible. Because peace is not built on perfect knowledge. Peace is built on quiet trust. Trust that you do not have to walk alone. Trust that even when your mind feels restless, God is still present. Trust that even when your thoughts feel loud, your heart can still find calm. Sometimes the mind needs time to learn a new rhythm. A rhythm where thoughts exist, but they do not control everything. A rhythm where uncertainty exists, but it does not steal every moment of peace. And little by little, that rhythm becomes natural. The mind begins to slow down. The breath becomes deeper. The heart becomes lighter. and the worries that once felt overwhelming begin to lose their weight. Not because life became perfect, but because something inside you changed. You remembered that you were never meant to carry the entire future alone. Some things will unfold in their own time. Some answers will arrive when the moment is right, and some worries will quietly disappear once the mind stops feeding them. Tonight, you do not need to solve everything. You only need to allow yourself a moment of rest. Let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders soften. Let your thoughts move without trying to chase them. Because sometimes the most powerful step forward is simply allowing your mind to rest for a while. And before this video ends, there is one simple question I would like to leave with you. If you feel comfortable, write it in the comments. Tonight, what is one thing you are ready to release from your mind?